Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. And on today's show, we're going to talk about how business owners can cross a bridge and become investors and build their net worth, build their cash flow. We have a lady from the Orlando, Florida area, and she's been in commercial real estate for a long time, and she saw the need to help these business owners because they're growing and they're doing well, but they just needed that extra push to get them to own real estate, maybe their first property, and then transition into owning many properties and kind of parlay like stepping stones. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. Please welcome Amy Calandrino. She's a CCIM. She's the Chief Executive Officer and founding principal and broker of Beyond Commercial. So welcome to the show, Amy. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me. And I will soon have my SIOR. I just submitted my application for that. So.
Okay. And for people that don't know what SIOR is, it's a trade, professional trade association for industrial property brokers. And people work that tongue twister. They work within industrial. It could be light industrial, heavy industrial, and I think now we're considering like these Amazon pop-up buildings as industrial. So it's just an emerging trend you're seeing everywhere. They're building these shells. And I mean, it's amazing how fast they can build these buildings. And there's such a demand right now because everything is really about like these distribution hubs. And we're seeing Amazons of the world and those different grow into this. And so it's a very good designation to have as well.
Yeah.
It's always good to always be learning, right? We're always learning new things.
Yes. If you're not learning, you're not growing.
So Amy, in a nutshell, can you kind of walk us through, like, I know you were considering going to law school and you like decided somebody that came, you were working in the legal field and somebody came in and was in the leasing business, I believe I heard on a podcast. And then you said, wait, this seems like a pretty cool business. Many moons ago, and now you're here now and started your brokerage after probably learning the industry, and you really cater to. Can you walk us through like what your client looks like and like how you're helping them grow their business, and then maybe give us a case study of like, he got the first building for Bob and Shelley, and now we have 10 buildings or whatever that might be that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started, as most brokers do, doing a lot of tenant representation deals. Those are really plentiful, but I feel like my differentiating quality that I kind of brought to it was thinking about the deal and thinking of it as a space for them to make them money. So not just where their needs were then, but where were they going to grow? And that kind of came from my own experience of helping my company with my family's company with their space, and the other broker who helped us, it was great, but he didn't really build in elasticity. So we were putting people like in the server closet and it was really hindering our business. And so I just knew from having a business that there was a need to really not just think about today, but then think about for tomorrow. So coming up with like a strategy and a plan and a tool for that space to really throw off a lot of money for them. So I did a lot of tenant representation deals, eventually helped to do lease versus buy analysis, get people to buy property. A lot of times I really love to have a business owner, again, build in space for elasticity. So if maybe you can afford 50,000 square feet and you only need 30,000 square feet of warehouse space, then you can go lease out that other 20,000 square feet and you have that room to kind of grow into. So I'm all about, giving yourself a lot of options, flexibility, while still it being a meaningful venture for you. So of course I ended up getting into landlord rep, eventually helping, clients, of course, dispose of it. One of my gifts is I'm really good at marketing and, building relationships. And so we did a really good job from owners. So we've had actually some of the more established owners come to us in our market too. So not just those we've helped grow, but we've established some relationships with some multi-generational family offices, smaller family offices here in Orlando. So we could really bring a lot of value to any kind of small and medium sized, business that's operating here, especially those that want to build wealth. And if they're just strictly, their business is investing and they're wanting to bring value and increase, the rents and decrease their vacancy, we can do a phenomenal job at that. Our marketing machine is incredible. So I would say a great case study would be Jessie Park. She's owner of Inspired Insurance Solutions. She's one of the top now women business-owned companies here in Orlando. She's also known nationally, and she's been to a lot of speaking engagements for insurance firms. But when she came to me, she was kind of like working out of her house, just wanted a small, office space, didn't want to commit to something. And I mean, it wasn't a really big deal, but I wanted to take a lot of, I worked with her at the time. I didn't have the really, really big team that I have now. We've grown to be actually the largest women-led independent commercial real estate brokerage in Orlando now. So I have a small business, but we're pretty mighty. But when she came to me, I personally, helped her find that space. Eventually, she needed a little bit more space because the space we found her was great. Then she needed more space. Then eventually I helped her buy a building, which actually now we are listing for sale for her to 1031 into some other investments. And that all happened over a 4-year period, of time, by just doing this analytical, stair stepping, having this plan. And so, our ideal clients are going to be the ones that want to kind of think about things and kind of go through that process with us so that we can get them that great result.
That's so awesome. I think a lot of people out there, whether you're in the residential space or the commercial space, you look at oh, I need a place to buy, and you don't think about 5 steps later.
Yeah.
And essentially I equate what you were talking about. Maybe you buy a bigger property and you're only going to occupy 50 or 60% of that space, but that other 40% of the space can almost completely offset your debt service payment, your mortgage payment, right? So why wouldn't you want to take advantage? Just like in the residential space, they talk about the young homeowner going out and renting the other rooms out. They call it house hacking, right? It's the same principles.
Yes, I was reading about that the other day.
Yeah. So that's the mindset people need to create wealth, because it's a lot easier if you think about this and get a professional like yourself to give the guidance. Okay, let's think 5 years from now. Let's just think of what's going to happen. Let's think about what if you can get a bigger space now and your payment would be less because we're going to lease out the other space. And then you got the depreciation, you got the mortgage interest pay down from your tenant. I mean, it's just kind of a win-win. I like the way you're approaching this. I kind of look at what you're doing almost as a financial planner, but a commercial real estate planner really is what you're doing. You're really helping people grow. And it's great to hear the success of the insurance agent who was working out her house, having success, and all of a sudden it's wait, go buy a building. You need office space. Bring in junior brokers, right, and grow your business. Now you have seats and you have desks, and you can even take that other 30 or 40% and lease that out. So you're it's not a scary proposition when you lay it out for them right there. Hey, look, you're going to have this all leased out. Your payment's only going to be this. Because I think a lot of people get overwhelmed in the beginning. Oh, I don't want to take on this debt, right? But they don't see hey, you can limit that risk. And that's what you do with your rent versus buy kind of analysis, which is cool. So now you've grown this.
I also just invite them over to my office. Come see what owning a building looks like. I strongly encourage, if you're going to work with a commercial real estate professional, perhaps they should have been through the process, themselves, and have an intimate understanding, because I think you have a whole nother vantage point and appreciation. So, I mean, the turning point for her was when she came over. She saw how I had it set up with, areas of growth and different opportunities. She's like, oh, okay, I see how that works now. And I love to educate folks. I don't need someone that already knows things. Not that I can't bring value to them, But bringing someone up to and helping them is incredibly fulfilling for me.
So when you're getting started in commercial real estate, obviously there's different food groups and stuff. But let's say you want to focus. The easiest place to start for the newer commercial agent is tenant rep, right? Like that's the place to be. And the deals are quite lucrative. I'm not an expert in that field, but I'm a California real estate broker and a Nevada salesperson. I live in Nevada now. I've done a lot of real estate residential transactions, and commercial was always very interesting to me because it seems like if you know what you're doing, that the paydays can be very good because you're getting like on a standard 12-month lease. It's like you get like how do they base the commissions typically? I'm just curious.
It just depends. I mean, sometimes landlords may have bonuses. First and foremost, I try to find the solution that's going to fit them best, and then,
Commission
if we
second.
close it, if we close it, I'm like, okay, landlord, what's the percentage split on this? But it's similar to a house. We can't really discuss too much, commissions,
Sure.
but generally it's in the range of, depending on the market, of anywhere, 3-4% of the gross lease value
For
over
the first 12 months?
No, over the whole term. So if it's a 10-year deal, it would be based on that. So if the more years, the better. But the amount of years that I'd recommend to someone would just depend on their overall
Yeah.
overall plans for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, no, it always interests me like how, I mean, residential real estate is pretty simple. The leasing world was always kind of foreign to me because I don't really pay attention to that. Although now that I'm doing a lot more SBA lending, I'm more into like how it all structures out. I work with a lot of franchise startups, right? Like they're always looking for space, and so I'm just curious on just learning from that standpoint. So when did you buy your first building? Did you do that pretty early in your career?
It wasn't actually until 2019, and so I ran the brokerage pretty much by myself until 2018. And so what I ended up doing was kind of subleasing space for folks, when I first started adding them until I found the right building. And then I took it from a 4-tenant space to a 2-tenant space. And so, first floor, second floor. And then I think I told you at the beginning of the show, I'm actually working on selling that now. And doing a sale leaseback where, I stay here for a little bit of time, but I have a handshake agreement actually to buy another building. And then my husband's downstairs, I'm upstairs, and he's buying another building too. So we're basically taking it from 1 building to 2 buildings and potentially a Airbnb.
So that's
actually 1 building and 3 buildings, actually.
So you practice what you preach. You got
Yes.
the building. You've at first it was probably, everybody's a little bit worried, like, okay, is the real estate market still going to be booming? Like, there's the possible setbacks, but at the end of the day, we all need space. So you're on the bottom floor, your husband's business is on the top floor.
Vice versa. He's
Vice
downstairs,
versa.
I'm upstairs.
Got it. And now you bought well, the property's appreciated, and now you're going to 1031 do a lease back for X amount of time,
Yep.
and you're going to have X amount of proceeds to go 1031 exchange. Now, for people that are listening, 1031 is a very, very great tool, whether it's residential or commercial real estate. It's a tax, you defer paying taxes, and you can keep on doing that over and over again. So a lot of people will do that because they can't depreciate a building anymore, or if you've done very well on the buy side, meaning you bought well and it quickly appreciated, you can take that equity and then you parlay it, right? It's like Monopoly. Instead of now, what you want to do is buy. Maybe this is a $3 million building. Now you're going to go out and buy using the equity. You're going to go out and buy 2 $3 million buildings and possibly 1 Airbnb. So this is how people grow their wealth significantly. Like if you look at anybody in real estate, all my friends, all my colleagues that I talk to, all the clients I have, they do this. They parlay. I call it parlaying. It sounds good.
It is a parlay. You just, I kind of do the same thing. I play poker. some, and sometimes blackjack. And so, let's say I bring $500 to the table, and as soon as I get that, put the my original away to the side, and I'm just playing like my winnings. And so kind of like the same thing, I'm pulling some of it out, and then I'm able to kind of redistribute it in a way that makes sense for our lifestyle. I mean, the reason I got this building is so that I would have flexibility. And let's just say we wanted to continue to own this. This would be a building that we could continue to like own and lease out, and would be still a good investment. But we have multiple. A lot of people think that buying something is going to kind of lock them down, but if you've thought of a lot of different variables, that's not necessarily the case. So.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau Eckstein, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again. Just go back to when you got into real estate. So you met this person at your previous career, and then You're like, I want to do this business. Did you go work for a broker, or did you just start your own company right off the bat?
I started my own company right off the bat. So my mother-in-law, she has had 7 businesses over the course of her career. So prior to this, I'm spending Saturdays. Her last business is a flower and gift shop. I'd spend Saturdays with me. She'd teach me like cost of goods, like how she runs everything. And, one of the business brokers I refer to a lot, he's like, it's like the cleanest business I've ever seen. So I just knew that owning a business was possible. I didn't have any fear about doing that. And I just love to learn. I've been one of those people that if, I want to learn a language, I want to learn how to play piano, I want to learn that. I have the discipline to do that. So I did have mentors, but I had a friend be my broker and qualify my brokerage. And I owned my brokerage 100% from October 26, 2010 is when I founded the brokerage, and I've owned it 100% since then. And then as soon as I got my broker's license, I took over the brokerage, and but so I've never worked for anybody else. I've built this whole enterprise myself from scratch.
That's amazing. I love that. Where's the best place you would recommend if somebody's watching this in the future, and they are, because we have a lot of real estate professionals and investors, where would you say there's kind of a good tenant rep leasing training out there? Is there anything online, or is it really kind of you got to learn boots on the ground kind of thing, like work for a broker, or is there any kind of like training you would recommend that would get your feet wet? That's pretty good.
Well, thankfully for new people to the field, CCIM has come up with some really awesome classes, especially focused on different areas. One of their new courses they just launched this year in 2021 is Successful Strategies for Tenant Representation. I had the opportunity of attending that class myself this year, and I'm like, man, if I had that, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache. It was taught by Susie Jones Walker. Susie Jones Walker Webb. Yeah, in Nevada.
She's here right in Las Vegas.
Yeah. She's right in Las Vegas.
Yeah. I heard I've been on one of her classes sometime. But I can't remember. Maybe it was a continuing thing for my Nevada real estate license. But yeah, she's super sharp.
Oh, sure. She's an amazing tenant rep. So yeah, I would say number one. And then of course becoming a CCIM and going through all that coursework, completely changed the trajectory of my career for the better. I mean, I'm looking back at submitting my portfolio for SIOR, and I could just see double every year the amount of volume that we've been able to do. And just last year in 2021, me and my team, which I'm responsible, I bring in about 95% of the business just through word of mouth, spiderweb effect. We closed 47 transactions. So small but mighty.
Good year. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I think I think for people out there listening, it's like, it was amazing to hear you say, hey, I've been around business my whole life.
Right.
And you just did it, and no fear, and now you're here, and you run one of the largest independent commercial brokerages there in Florida. So that's fantastic that you're able to do that and just kind of like drive through. I mean,
There's been some moments. I've had some moments where I've said, "Oh my God, am I going to continue to do this?" Like, I've had I always say it's a Barbara Corcoran moment. Barbara Corcoran talks about when she was in business and her husband left her for the secretary and said to her, "You never, ever, ever achieve like anything in business." And of course, he ended up being out of business and late. But I've had a Barbara Corcoran moment, and I literally was like, "Do I want to keep doing this?" Because it does get hard, especially you have the choice. Do you want to stay a solo? And be basically kind of like self-employed, or you want to build a business? I decided to every single thing that I've done. I built a system. We use Salesforce. Every time we open up a new deal, it auto populates the checklist that goes along with that deal. So we have a 51 step checklist to doing tenant representation. And so I've built, buyer representation, tenant representation, landlord representation, seller representation. We have basically a guide, which of course we can change depending on the client, but that's why we're able to be successful and deliver the same quality of service to every single client. Like, obviously it's not like we're McDonald's, but we have that kind of process and that type of viewpoint. But I mean, there's been moments, because it's taken a lot of investment of time and money and energy, especially I have a 1-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. The last few years have been, a lot to grow this much in the last, 4 years.
so what trends are you seeing in the market? All right, everybody's talking about inflation and recessions and so forth. I know Florida's been absolutely, especially Orlando, it's just been like a giant boom. And I mean, things have to slow down. We know that. And I see residential, there's starting to be more inventory, at least in Nevada. But I'm curious, for one, what trends are you seeing in commercial real estate? Differences in like the needs of what or wants that people are coming to you with that has been different from maybe 5 or 8 years ago in real estate. What kind of trends do you see there first?
I'd say, first of all, just rents have become ridiculous. Like, rents are ridiculous to rent any kind of space, to where that owners are going to figure out how to beg and borrow and whatever they need to do to try to buy something, because the economics of buying in most situations seems to make more sense than leasing, just because the retail rents, industrial rents, and office rents are above even levels from the last economic cycle in the late 2000s. And so I would say, first of all, that's kind of where we are. And I have not seen that really coming down now. So that's as a whole. There are some kind of specific changes. I would say that in retail, we are starting to see a bit more second gen space kind of coming available. And so I think that the whole rent to revenue analysis is kind of coming out of whack. And so it's becoming kind of really difficult for an owner to afford these rents, especially with all these. So you take for a retail business, if they already have 30% going out the door to Uber Eats, they're having trouble, finding people to work for them, and they're paying these astronomical rents. So first of all, I would say, like, in the retail sector, if it's a user, they're having a lot of challenges, which I think may then end up and then people are going to consider, am I going to pay for gas in my car to go shop at this store, or go out to this restaurant, or go get this? And so retail, I think, is going to have but first bit of friction, I guess, and some adjusting in my market. If I was just to tell you from being boots on the ground and talking to business owners and doing these kinds of deals, and I've talked about it in my Monday market update, where I really think that's where we're going to see some, and especially with the rising interest rates. And then industrial, because that's basically the new retail, I think that's going to be the least impacted by the interest rates and the shifting economy. There's a couple things that I would say there. They are alleviating a lot of the supply chain issues. We're going to start using a lot more rivers again to get things out to people, shift all the container ships back over to the East Coast. And that's going to really help manufacturing, really going to help industrial. So there's just so many positive things coming continuing to come online for industrial, that I think it's going to be not very impacted, if any. And again, this is the Orlando market. I think other areas in the country are going to have their own unique circumstances, because if you look back to last economic cycle, how Texas fared was completely different than Florida and California. I mean, I think every state and every area has its own level of exposure, as the Fed has decided that they are going to raise these rates. And basically, I think they have decided they want to go ahead and force us into this recession, which I think is going to be quick and similar to what we saw in the 70s, because there's a lot of parallels to what went on then versus now. Last of all, office I would put like right in the middle as far as risk is concerned in the area of Orlando. I do a lot of office space deals, but I'm seeing many more businesses continuing to rubber band back to the office, and seeing that, especially if you're a smaller business without a lot of people, that the whole 100% remote is not, sustainable. And I think that people are starting to care less and less and less about this pandemic and coronavirus and all of that. And so if I had to rank, and you basically say, red light, green, green light, red light, yellow light, then I would say retail might be a little red as far as like investing is, concerned. And I would, really make sure to look at the specific investment and look at, whether there's a value add. And then, office would be yellow. And I would still feel pretty green about industrial if I, underwrote the deal.
Very good. Thank you. That was very useful. I think everything is location based, because every place has little different caveats and different, right now I think Florida is still getting a lot of people that want to move there for no state tax, for politics. You see a lot of the politics people they're fleeing California because they don't want to deal with California politics. And they come, like myself, I'm from the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I moved to Nevada. I go, wait, no state tax, and the house that I would buy in California is $1.4 million. The house I buy in Las Vegas is only $400,000. That's a big difference. Big difference for a better house.
Yeah,
It's crazy. So we're seeing a lot of growth in Nevada. I think California is always going to be strong. In general, people love the beaches and so forth of the West Coast, just like Florida's got beautiful beaches and so forth. But this time around, I think Florida will fare a lot better than they did in 2007 and 8, because I remember that was terrible times. But I think now there's so much more diversity in your economy too, because you're just getting businesses moving there. I think a lot of people thought of just retirees in Florida, but
yeah,
it's a booming economy.
So yeah, you could look at the numbers to kind of judge your market. And so in Florida, we have the Florida Chamber of Commerce. They have a scorecard that you can watch a lot of the numbers that are going on statewide. We have a local economic partnership, also looking at the Bureau of Labor, statistics to kind of check the population migration and all those kinds of things. And it's important to understand those numbers and watch, the trends. To kind of see if there are any shifts and any changes. As of yet, there has not.
Which food group that you work in do you think is like would you say would be the easiest to do tenant representation? Would that be office or retail or industrial? What deals seem to be the easiest to put together? Just curious.
I'd say industrial, because there's not a lot to look at. So there's not a lot of vacancies. You won't have as long to tour. It's going to be like, you could pick this one, or again, I guess this is the only one you could pick. So sometimes you might have 2 or 3 options, but with industrial, it's so specific to where are your workers coming from? How does the space need to be, positioned, and you're looking at all those things. And so you're really going to narrow it down to, let's look in this particular market. We have a few industrial submarkets here in Orlando that have a 2% vacancy rate. So, we get calls, multiple calls. Well, we get Instagrams, we get Facebooks, we get calls actually. So when I say calls, I use it like in air quotes. So we get text calls, all those kinds of things from people reaching out to us for help because they know that that's, we do this. If they are telling me, hey, I need a 5,000 square foot, warehouse, space, in this very specific area, I let them know, first of all, I can't guarantee you we're going to find that specific, space for you. Like, because there's very, very little inventory. So you may need to kind of go up in your requirement. And so we just really need to understand, what they need, but or you may have to consider another area that you weren't already considering. So I would say industrial, it's the easiest and the hardest, because if you find something for someone, they're like, okay, let's get the deal done. And it's gonna probably be like a market rate deal. There's not gonna be a lot of concessions, and so you can kind of wrap those up pretty quickly. Office space, yeah, and the office space has been really challenging because rents are approaching $40 a square foot downtown, and then you're looking at like $150 a parking spot for a small business. That's a lot of money. So those are like hard depending on where you're looking at, and retail's always difficult. It's just it's just very challenging.
So I have a question. When negotiating leases, is there like a certain point where, like, if it's a smaller lease, the commercial brokers will just basically negotiate it, and then when you get into like the bigger, huge square footage, could be a couple $1 million lease term, is that where the attorneys get involved in the bigger leases, and you kind of stay in the middle and they're negotiating the terms in the contract?
Well, no matter what size deal, we will typically recommend that as someone has a lease reviewed, because another reason too I got into this is watching so many business owners come through the law firm like I was working for and like ready to like claim bankruptcy because they picked the wrong place or they accidentally defaulted their lease or those kinds of things. I would say the broker really needs to be leading the financial discussions, and they are going to know what are market concessions and all those kinds of things. Where the lawyer is going to come in is to make sure there aren't any gotchas, that the insurance, the renewal language is appropriate. There's a lot of different terms that the lawyer needs to go. But like on the financial, regardless of the size deal, your broker really needs to be driving that, as long as he or she or they like have a really good understanding of like what the market prevails.
Yeah, I mean the negotiations on a tenant rep are similar to it's. I mean, I think everything is similar. Like, it's residential, you're buying a house, right? Like, you're negotiating, okay, like you pay this transfer tax and you pay these costs. I mean, it's a similar process as a tenant rep. The only thing is like, hey, you should have an attorney review the language to make sure all the renewals and everything's good. And that's always recommended, right? This is hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next couple of years that you'll be paying in lease and rents, and you don't want to get caught. So, okay, I got it. So the process really isn't very complicated. No. It's not rocket science, but it's an art, like anything. Like, if you look at top agents, like why is this guy the number one multifamily broker in the area, right? And it really comes, I think that my friend is like a top a multifamily broker in like the mid-range properties in California, and he said, and really I go, well, what's your secret? He goes, I just lock myself in a room and I make phone calls, and he still does to this day. He still does this today. So it's just interesting. I think anything really in business really comes down to the same thing. It's creating systems and processes to get in front of people if you're in sales, especially if you're in sales, right? If somebody's thinking commercial real estate, they need space or they want to sell space, you want to be the one they think of, right? And you've done a great job. That's how you were able to build your business
Yeah.
So you're like, there's a lot of commercial brokers aren't on Instagram, aren't showing listings, right? They haven't gotten that yet. And I think a lot of the agents that are in their late 50s and 60s, they're going to be exiting out of the business. There's a huge opportunity for the millennials and the younger generation to come in and be good in this business. Is there a need in the commercial sector right now, or is there an oversupply? Like in residential, I think there's an oversupply of agents, right? Like, because it's such an easy barrier of entry, where I feel commercial is a little bit, even though it's the same license typically, it's just a more complex, right? A lot of people are intimidated to get into commercial real estate.
Yeah, I think you in every field have people that don't know what they're doing and overcompensate with bravado. And so I can typically tell what someone knows their stuff or doesn't know stuff by the attitude that they come to me with. And I'm just like, oh, they're just like, I mean, I'll just tell your listeners, I'm like, oh, this is an idiot right here. Like, cause they're trying to overcompensate versus if you're like humble, like when I first started and I didn't and I was working on a deal, I'd tell the other side, like, hey, like, like help me to understand like where you're coming from, or go to my mentor and talk about it. I wouldn't like immediately start, yelling at the other, other person. And so, yeah, I do think I would say there's an overabundance of people transitioning over from residential to commercial because they're beating their heads against the wall in residential because they can't get anything done because the way the market is. And so like, oh, let me come over to commercial. Well, they're not really aligned. Maybe they've joined like 100% brokerage, and maybe they don't have like a mentor or whatever the situation is. And they don't have that humble, let me learn like attitude. Instead, like, I'm gonna now, try to, go with the big dogs and, really puff themselves up. I just think it's kind of like, it's annoying. There are a bit of those, and I can just, I can see, I can just, because I've been doing this long enough, I can see that. And I think that's in every field. You have people that are humble, and you have other people who aren't. And so I would never discourage somebody from coming over and doing, transitioning from over to residential to commercial, because I think you can be incredibly successful at doing that. But you got to do it in such a way so that you don't do your clients a disservice, and so that you are providing that quality. Because at the end of the day, the reason why I've built the business that I've done is I've always tried to do the right thing. And so then that person, I may be on my 8th deal for someone now, and they've referred me their sister and their cousin and their children and like their family. And that's like a really, that's a huge compliment. But that's because I was long view, again, the way I coach my clients to be as well, about how I handle things. And so I think if anyone's looking to get into the business is to have that kind of attitude, because this is a long game. But it's also, I look back and I can't believe, like, like how quickly it feels like it all has happened in the same respect. It's been tedious and grueling. But just keeping that long range just helped me to get where I'm at. And then I'm still setting goals for moving into the future.
That's awesome. Lastly, let's talk about your podcast, which is called Performance Mindset. I think people can visit your website at performancemindset.show.
Yes.
Talk to me about your podcast and what is Performance Mindset to you? Why this name, and tell me a little bit about the show.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. And so I talked a little bit earlier in this show about kind of my Barbara Corcoran moment. And so I think for a period of time within my business, I lacked the full empathy and leadership skills that I really needed to continue to grow my business in a scalable manner. And it all kind of came into fruition. Like, I thought I was doing all the right things, like putting together this plan and all these kinds of things, but I wasn't being as vulnerable with my team, of letting them in. I wasn't being as transparent and as open. And so, it kind of bred the wrong kind of environment. And so I think there was a lot of like fear and different things and uncertainty. And so I lost half my sales team as well as my only admin when I had a toddler and a 6-week-old at home. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, is this like done? Or am I going to like keep, going forward? And so I kind of like took a step back and really kind of worked on maybe being a little less guarded, a little bit more open, so that not just like the relationship I have with my clients, but having that kind of relationship with my team. And then also discovering that no matter like how terrible of a situation that you can go to, if you have that performance mindset and that resiliency, that you can bounce back. And I've bounced back 7 times stronger than I was like a year ago. And so that's why I launched the podcast. And I also came up with what's called the Sports Success System for my agents. It's a proprietary product only available to Beyond commercial agents. I may eventually, branch it out and license it otherwise. But it coaches them exactly how to develop that same kind of resilient mindset. And I'm seeing like huge results. We're getting the biggest listings I've ever, seen start coming in, and then really going out and doing things I never thought possible before, and I didn't see happen within my organization. So it just all came on the heels of a failure. I think some of the greatest successes come on the heels of what, someone would call a failure. Although I think it's more of like a learning opportunity than a failure.
Yeah, I love what you just said, and I agree 100%. I was listening to David Goggins' book on Audible, and I just loved like how he just could grit anything out. I mean, granted, I probably wouldn't do half the stuff he was doing, like running with a broken leg, but I think our minds are so powerful, and we have to learn how to embrace them to really like. I struggle with self-doubt all the time, and it's like, why, like. Why? What is in there that does that to you? And like learning how the brain works, and then learning these. So I love what you're doing with that, because I think that's like the most important thing. Because there's no difference between me and this person over here, but this person over there is selling more loans or more houses or more leases than I am, like by a lot, and I probably know more than that person. What is the difference? It's really the difference right here. So I think understanding the mind is just like. And having no fear and learning to have no fear, and like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I've had some like situations with clients, and it's like, I feel guilty, like, and nothing that I did, right? Like, it was just like, whatever the situation was, nothing I did. And I take it so personally, and it like ruins my, like for days I get like, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, but like I did what I was supposed to do. I can't help what happens sometimes, but like,
Yeah.
You have to learn how not to internalize and like take that personally.
And that's
like,
what I teach. That's part of the Sports Success System.
I love it.
Because I think that one of the things I did wrong too is I bred a culture of entitlement. I think I told you 95% of the deals that come from me. And before I would just feed people, and I didn't have like that culture. And so I just let a lot of things go. I was not as good of a leader as I could have been. And now my team says, oh my gosh, you're so like strong. Thanks for giving, I'm not weak on them. I definitely I've become like a lot more of like a coach to really lead them. And I'm seeing a lot more results come from it.
I love that. I really appreciate your time. It was
Yeah.
a great conversation. Guys, if you can go to beyondcommercial.com, and then for the podcast, performance mindset .show. I'm actually listening to, what's the book? I just got to tell you, because I think it's pretty good. I like this author. I'm just drawing a blank. Mel Robbins.
Yes.
I like Mel Robbins. I listened to her 5-second rule. Then I'm listening to the high five habit, which is just the mindset hack. So, anyways, I listen to all sorts of people and read all sorts of books. But actually, I listen because I think that helps. But I love what you're doing with the coaching. I hope at one point you do license that out, because I think that's golden for many people in the real estate industry and lending and commercial and residential. It all comes down to that mindset. So thank you so much. Appreciate the conversation, and I hope everybody that's going to watch this after it's edited enjoys this show, which we're bringing on really good topics, and I'm trying to diversify what we're talking about because, real estate in general gets boring, but I like to talk about more of the personal development and putting that together with your sales and real estate business. So anyways, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.